Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee L, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster Smart Diode Wiring Kit. Before we do that though, let's just take a minute, check these out, and make sure they're going to work for you. Before we jump right in, I figured I'd touch base on one of the big questions that a lot of people ask when it comes to setting up their vehicle to flat tow it. And that's, what parts am I going to need? So there's going to be a total of 5 main components. The first one's a base plate, which allows you to hook up your tow bar, which is the second component. That's the link connecting the motorhome to your vehicle. Third main part will be safety cables, and these are just there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. Keep everything paired together. Fourth main part will be tow bar wiring, and that'll just transfer the lighting functions from the back of your coach to the back of your Jeep. And last but not least, the fifth main part will be a supplemental braking system. What that'll do is apply the brakes in your Jeep whenever you hit the brakes in your coach, bringing you to a more predictable and safe stop. Here's a good example of the diode wiring actually working. So we got the left turn signal going on our motorhome, and it's sending it back here to the left turn signal on our Jeep. And the same is going to hold true for the right turn, your brakes, and your tail lights, so you have all your bases covered there. And in terms of picking out what wiring is going to be best for your Jeep, I think this is going to be the best bet. And I say that because there's a lot of different variations of diode wiring and things like that. So there's a standard kit that is compatible with some of these Grand Cherokee L's and not with others. But with the smart diodes, these are going to work across the board, regardless if you're, what submodel your Jeep is, if you have that park sense feature or not. So by going with this, it kind of eliminates some of that, some of that information that you might have to acquire or search for to figure out what your particular Jeep is actually equipped with. So, bottom line, these are going to work regardless of the submodel and what features or options your Jeep has. When it comes to actually hooking up to your motorhome and you're ready to flat tow, really straightforward. You're just going to plug your cable into the back of your coach and into the front of your Jeep. So really nothing to it at all. With that said, there's a couple of kits available that you can decide from. One of them is going to just come with the diodes, the wiring, and some ins and outs. I kind of call that the bare bones kit. And you would use that if you have a tow bar that comes included with an umbilical cable and a 6-way round connector plug, like the Roadmaster Nighthawk, for example. So if you end up going with a tow bar like that, then that's a diode kit that you're going to want, or if you already happen to have those components. And then there's another kit that comes with everything I just talked about, but you get the 6-way round connector and the umbilical. So if your tow bar doesn't come with those, or you don't have them already, that's a diode kit that you're going to want to use. When it comes down to it, this is going to be the best option in terms of getting lighting signals to the back of your Jeep, at least in my opinion. And as far as the installation goes, it's not that it's really complicated. It is definitely time consuming though. And with our particular Jeep at least, everything was really tight. You just don't have a ton of room to work. So be prepared, spend a little bit of time. You got to route wires from the front to the back, and stay focused. You should be in pretty good shape. With that said though, why don't we go ahead, pull into the garage and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Jeep, and we have the front fascia removed, and that's because we're doing this the same time that we're doing our base plate, which is what I recommend because you got a lot more room to work. But with that said, this can be done with everything put back together if you're doing it at a later date or something like that. But what you want to do is take the big bundle of your wire and take one end of it and just kind of drop it down through the engine compartment. And this is where it's going to come out, right here in this area. And I just have it loosely routed across the front here over to our bracket where our connector is going to get mounted up. You then want to grab the rubber dust boot from the connector plug. We'll just slide that on. I like to do that. It kind of keeps the wiring up while we work on it. And we're going to separate the wiring. That way we can work with the individual strands. So carefully cut in between them. And peel them back a few inches. And what I like to do is kind of draw them all back together and cut off maybe the last 1/4 inch or something. That way if we nick the wiring, we were separating them, kind of get a fresh start. And then each end of the wire, we're going to strip back the insulation a little bit and twist the wire nice and tight so we'll get a good connection. So I'll do that same thing for our remaining ends here. If you take your connector plug and look at the back of it, the terminals here, they are going to be labeled. They're kind of hard to see, but the labels are there. And so you'll have TM for taillights, so the brown wire gets plugged in there. This one is GD for ground, so the white wire goes there. And then this one is LT for left turn, so the yellow wire plugs into that. And this one is RT for right turn, so the green wire goes there. So the way these work, just have small set screws, back them out with a Phillips head screwdriver, and I like to take them out almost all the way, but not completely, because these things are easy to lose. And then you'll just simply take the corresponding wire, place it into the terminal, and tighten on the set screw. So I'll just work my way around until we get all the wires hooked up. This is how the connector plug is going to look once you have the wiring hooked up. There's really nothing to it. And something that I like to do at the very end, once we have everything hooked up and we verify it works, is come back in here with some sealer and glob it up on the terminals there to help keep it completely sealed, prevent moisture from getting in, and that'll help prevent corrosion from happening. But do it at the end, that way if you have to come back in here for any reason, we don't have a big mess to work with. So for now, we'll just pop that on and secure our connector plug here. So right here in this pocket, right before our wiring actually kind of goes up into the engine compartment, there's a factory ground stud that I'm going to use to ground out our diode wires. So I just kind of eyeball the length here, and you're going to want to very carefully just cut the white wire only, and we want to work with the side that is actually going to our connector plug. So we'll strip that back a little ways, remove the insulation from the end there, and we're going to crimp on a ring terminal. And anytime you make a connection, whether it be a butt connector, a spade terminal, ring terminal, this is how you're going to do it. Slide the bare end, slide the terminal over the bare end of the wire and just crimp it down. That's really all there is to it. And to get it grounded, I come in with a 10 millimeter. Remove this nut. You'll just take your ring terminal, slide it over the stud, and tighten the nut back down. As far as the remaining portion of the white wire that was left on the harness that went to nothing, I just separated it from the rest of our harness. And you want to hold on to this because we might use it here in a little while. So we'll set that to the side. And then as far as the rest of our wiring goes, I'm going to route this to the back of our Jeep up towards the taillights. And I'll go ahead and get that done and show you the path that I took to get it there. I got our wiring dropped down to the underside of our vehicle, and so it kind of comes into this pocket, and then I have it running over, and it's really tight in here, so you're gonna have to find kind of that opening to allow you to get it through, but it comes out, and along the firewall there, it drops straight down to the underside of our vehicle. To spend as little time as possible actually underneath of our Jeep, we're gonna do a little prep. So come to the back of your vehicle and open up the hatch and we can get our taillights removed. So there's just a panel here, a little plastic panel that needs to get popped off. And with this, you can take a trim tool or even a flathead screwdriver, and I actually just kind of come in behind it because these are kind of tricky to pry underneath, but just pry on that and this piece will pop off. And then we're gonna have a fastener for our taillight. That's a T30 Torx bit. That's what we'll use to pull that out. And then we'll grab our taillight and you can kind of just pull this side like this and then back. It seems to be the best way because there's these little alignment pins in here that kind of help retain the light. But once we get it free, we'll disconnect our wiring. You're going to have a red tab there. You can push that back and then push down on the tab in the middle to separate it. We'll set our light off to the side and do the same thing to get the other one removed. Eventually, you know, when we get our wiring ran back here, we're gonna have to pull it up into the taillight pocket. And so to help make that easier, I'm just gonna use a fish wire. It's just a piece of tubing. You could also use, you know, another piece of wire that you have, or a metal coat hanger. You can straighten it out. But essentially, I'm just gonna drop, you know, one end of this down through the taillight pocket to where it'll be accessible from underneath of our Jeep once we're back there. Underneath the front of our vehicle now, this is where our wiring drops down and everything's super tight under here, so kind of bear with us, doing our best. Whenever you route wiring, make sure to try and avoid any hot or moving parts, so keep that in mind while you're doing it. But there's a panel here on our Jeep, and there's just a couple of 10mm head bolts you can pull out to make this easier. I'm gonna drop it out of the way, but our wiring is gonna run through here, and this is actually where a lot of our factory brake lines are. And so I just use zip ties every now and again to keep it secure. It runs right along our fuel tank. And then at this point, it'll go up and over our subframe where I have it dropping down right here. So we got our wiring ran to about this point and it comes down right here in the middle, just in front of our spare tire. And this is where I made a connection and started to separate our wires to each side of the vehicle. So what I've done here is I cut our brown wire in half, and you know, this is hanging down right now just so we can see it. Once, you know, we get this wrapped up, I'll secure this out of the way. But you take your brown wire and cut it in half, strip back the ends of the insulation, and you can take the extra piece of white wire that we had, strip that insulation back, and twist it together on one end of that brown wire. Put both ends into a butt connector, crimp it down, and then the remaining piece of brown wire, go ahead and put it in the other end of the butt connector and crimp it down. And so that brown wire and the yellow wire are going to get routed to the driver's side. As far as the green wire goes and that extra white wire that we now added, those I got taped together, and those are going to get routed over towards the passenger side of our Jeep. I got our wires routed to each side, so the yellow and brown runs over through here. And then on the bottom of the frame rail there's just not a lot of room. There's the exhaust pipes and everything. There's a hole in the frame rail that I pushed our wiring through, and then I took a piece of wire loom, maybe about 8 inches of it, put it over the wire just so it's not rubbing up on metal. But essentially, you just push it back, and it comes out of the back of the frame rail there. There's a big opening. And There it is. And then this is our pull wire that we dropped down earlier and simply just taped our wiring to it. With the passenger side wiring, the white and green, essentially that just takes the same exact path that we did on the driver's side, you know, runs over, comes in through the frame, and we'll get it pulled up into the taillight pocket. Up top now, we'll grab our pull wire and feed our wiring into position here. And we can, so I'm going to separate these two ends here. And we'll strip these back, and each end is going to receive one of these red spade terminals. We'll get these crimped on. So at this point, I went ahead and tested our wiring to figure out what wire was our taillight circuit. And what I found was that it is the white wire with a light gray stripe, and there's two of those wires are almost identical. I can't hardly tell a difference, but the one that you're going to want to deal with, if you look at the back side of the connector plug, is this one over here. So that's the wire that we need to work on. And so I just followed that back to this area and kind of peeled back some of that tape. And what we're going to do is cut that wire in half and then strip the ends back and crimp on one of those red terminals. The kit's going to come included with two short pieces of white wire, and these are going to be ground wires. So one end I crimped on ring terminal, the other end a spade terminal. And I'm going to secure the ring terminal right here in this area using the provided self-tapping screw. Now you can grab your diode, and all the terminals are labeled here, so ground, that'll plug in there. And then the RV brake in, our new yellow wire is going to plug onto that terminal. RV tail in, our new brown wire is going to plug into that. And then car in, you want to plug that into our factory white and gray wire. And you want to plug it into the side furthest away from the actual taillight connector. So that'll snap in, and then the factory wire closest to the taillight connector, that'll plug into the one labeled car out. I did put a bead of silicone over where our connections are made just to help keep them in place and keep moisture out of there. And then it's hard to see, but right down in here there's a good flat spot, good piece of plastic, and I cleaned that off with some rubbing alcohol and let it dry. And I'm gonna stick this, because there's some two-sided sticky tape on the back of the diode. I'm gonna secure it right to it. And now at this point we could take our tail light, plug that factory connector right back into it, and reinstall our light the opposite way that we removed it. Over here on the passenger side, essentially we did the same exact thing. Really the only difference is going to be the color of wires. You know, our ground wire worked the same exact way. But our factory taillight signal, that's going to be the white wire with the orange stripe. So closest to our connector plug, goes into car out. The factory white with orange stripe further from the connector plug goes to car in. Then our new white wire that we ran up here, that goes to RV tail end, and the new green wire goes to RV brake end. Same concept. And what I'll do now is what we did over there. I'll put some sealer on it, peel this off, and secure it and get our tail light put back in place. With everything hooked up, it's a good idea to test your wiring to make sure that it's working properly. And I just plugged into a test box, which essentially simulates a motorhome. Probably not going to have this at your house. You can always use your motorhome, but keep in mind if it has any issues on its own, it might mislead you into thinking it's something you did on the vehicle side. We'll go ahead and turn on our tail lights. Then we'll try our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and our brake lights. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster Smart Diode Wiring Kit on our 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee L.